This is the Canon C50. It has a full frame 7K sensor which can do up to 7K 60p. It embraces open gate recording and brings the dual hybrid operating system over from the R5C into a more video orientated body. In many ways, this is Canon's first real compact cinema camera. Sure, they have the R5C and the 1DC back in the day, but this is slightly smaller, and they're still basically stills hybrid cameras, just with some of the Cinema EOS functionality and its menu design sandwiched in there. This very much feels like the other way around. It's a small Cinema EOS camera, which has put the stills UI inside to make it a hybrid camera. It's so similar to Canon's approach to the R5C, but it's the other way around, if that makes sense. So let's look at the physical design. It's similar to a mirrorless camera like the R5C, but with the EVF stripped off and the edges squared off a bit, and a dedicated top handle with XLRs. It definitely feels a bit familiar. There's, without a doubt, a little bit of copying Sony's homework going on here. You can't ignore that. It does feel very much like Canon's version of the Sony FX3, but that's fine. Brands have similar shape cameras across the whole lineup from top to bottom. Nothing wrong with that. And to be honest, it's great to see the FX3 have some real competition in this form factor, as it's been hugely popular and they're still pretty much the only ones making cameras like this. This means the C80 feels significantly smaller than Canon's other cinema cameras like the C80 or the C100 back in the day, which was quite small. You know, it's only 665 grams. That's under half the weight of the C80, which is 1.3 kilograms. And it's almost the exact same dimensions as the R5C, but without the EVF, of course. So that means it's 16.5 millimeters shorter and 16 millimeters less deep as well. That makes a big difference actually. It makes it much easier to fit in a bag. With the top handle off, it fits so neatly into the pocket of a bag, which is such a small thing, but it makes such a big difference. It also has the big spaces for fan-based active cooling to make sure you don't run into any overheating problems. They say it's redesigned and improved over the R5C with a new front air intake and internal airflow design. The R5C has always been very reliable for us, but improvements are always welcome. One of the big drawbacks over the cameras above this in the Cinema EOS lineup is that the C50 does not have internal ND filters. Now this is very normal for cameras of this size and this price, as we all know, but even so, it's always a shame. Luckily though, the market for ND filters is better than ever. There are fantastic lens mounts with ND inside, matte boxes with variable ND in, which are incredibly lightweight nowadays, and even normal filters for the front of your lens are so much better than they ever have been before. Today we're using one of our favorites. This is the Nissi JetMag Pro system. It's a magnetic system, so it just snaps right onto the front of your lens. It's very fast and easy to use and to change between filters between different lenses. But they also secure nicely, so when you line them up, they do not come off the front of your thing. You twist them and they just pop straight off. So they shouldn't come off by accident, which gives a lot of peace of mind when you're working. They have minimal effect on color and sharpness, and because they're so thin, you can stack them like we are here without affecting how wide you can go on your lens too much to see vignetting. They are great If you're still using regular and screw-on ND filters, I really recommend you upgrade to these. And if you're buying C50, they're a perfect fit. Inside is a brand new 7K or 32 megapixels full frame sensor, which has a dual base ISO of 800 and 6400 when in C-Log 2. In video mode, you can record 7K with the full width of the sensor in Canon RAW Lite up to 60p. You actually get all three flavors of Canon's RAW codec: LT, SD, and HQ. So this actually has more in common with the high-end C400 than the C80, which is LT version of RAW only because of its SD cards. Impressive stuff. Then for the first time in a Cinema EOS camera, you can actually do open gate 3x2 recording. This is also 7K up to 30p, and you can use either RAW or the H.265 based XF HEVC codec. This is a massive deal, but let's go into more detail on it in a second. Moving down to 4K, you can do full width video up to 120 frames a second, and it's oversampled from the full 7K resolution up to 60 frames a second. In 2K, you can go up to 180p. Autofocus works at all frame rates as well, which is nice to see. We get C-Log 2 and C-Log 3 to choose from, and for codecs we have Cinema RAW Lite, XF AVC and XF HEVC for H.265 recording. This is a list of some of the available bit rates and file sizes in camera. Most of this is very similar to the C80 and C400, of course. The new things are really the new 3x2 OpenGate mode bits, and it's great to see you have a variety of bitrate options in both RAW and XF HEVC. The lowest you can go is 7K HEVC long op, which is 486 megabits a second in 25p. That's not too bad for 7K OpenGate recording. Now let's talk about that OpenGate mode. We actually made a video discussing exactly why we think OpenGate is so important for the industry, so make sure to go and watch that one if you haven't already. But what was really interesting to see was the comment section. People were convinced that Canon would be very reluctant and slow to add OpenGate, and yet here we are. There were also a lot of people full of praise for OpenGate workflows, for multi-format deliverables, even going so far as to say they would never buy another camera without OpenGate inside it. This multi-aspect ratio workflow is becoming so important as an increasing amount of everyone's work needs to be able to work well across both 16:9 and vertical 9:16 aspect ratios. So capturing in a taller than normal aspect ratio is becoming more and more critical for people's work. But OpenGate is also, of course, very welcome for anamorphic filmmaking as well, which is what it's originally intended for. This is going to be a fantastic format and camera to pair with full-frame anamorphic lenses like the Blazer Remus range, for example. Here on the C50, we get a full-frame 3x2 mode, which is 6960 by 4640 pixels. We can only get up to 30p in this mode, but we do get either Canon RAW Lite in LT or SD modes, or the XF HEVC files to choose from, which is nice to have a choice. Canon also have a new feature for the dual recording menu where you can record normal 4K footage onto the CF Express card and then a 1080p vertical crop onto the SD card at the same time. Great for fast turnaround work where you're handing off files to a social media team instantly. Unfortunately though, this only works in the regular 4K modes, not the 7K OpenGate mode. This may be a cinema EOS camera, but it's still very capable as a stills camera. There's no EVF, of course, which is its main limitation compared to Canon's main hybrid mirrorless cameras, but we do get nice detailed 32 megapixel stills with an electronic shutter that can take up to 40 images a second. There's also pre-record capture, which I was very surprised to see added as that's quite a high-end stills feature. Fantastic for unpredictable situations. And of course, because of the dual UI, it feels very familiar to anyone who's ever used a Canon mirrorless camera like the R5 or the R6. Just like the R5C before it, the C50 has Canon's dual UI implementation. So this means it is essentially two cameras in one. When you flick the switch over to video, it's a cinema EOS camera, just like the C80, C70, C400, C300 and so on. The menus all behave the exact same way and it's all designed from the ground up specifically for video use. It makes a big difference. Then when you change over stills mode, it reboots, which takes about 3 or 4 seconds. And then everything about the camera UI is the same as on the stills cameras like the R5 and the R6. This makes so much sense, especially for a video first camera like this. You don't want to be operating using a modified stills menu design. The cinema EOS menus and UI, they do make your life so much easier for professional video work. On the port side, it has a DIN port for timecode, a USB-C, a 3.5mm audio input and headphone jack. Full-size HDMI, finally, so that is a big step up over the R5C, and a LANC port for controllers, which is good to see. On the top is the multifunction hot shoe, which is how you actually attach the top handle, which has 2 full-size XLR ports and physical controls as well on the other side, plus a top mic holder and a cold shoe, as well as the zoom rocker, a lock switch and a record button. It has 2 card slots, one SD and one CF Express, so that's the same as the R5C has. It's a shame that they're 2 different media types. Mostly people prefer 2 of the same media type, but CF Express was probably needed for the file formats inside here, and having an SD card does mean that it's going to work with your media if you already own a C80 or a C70, as I do think those are going to be excellent A and B camera combinations with this camera. The battery slot is the same as on mirrorless cameras. It takes the LPE6NH batteries and does have a battery grip available, which lets you use 2 of them. You can also use PD power delivery over USB-C, and Canon make the PDE2 USB-C charger, which can either go into the USB port directly or into their DRE6P dummy battery DC coupler for a more secure option that won't pull out. We get a tally light on the front and on the back, and a zoom lever on the camera grip as well as the one up on the top handle. And you get lots of options in the menu for adjusting the behavior of this zoom. You do need to be using a lens with a servo zoom, of course, though. Most likely that would be their fantastic 24-105 or 70-200 f2.8 zooms with the servo attachment, because they're perfect for this camera. I would love to see some more affordable options which have simple servo zooms on them though. They do, for example, have the RFS 14-30mm, but that's a variable aperture and it only covers APS-C. I'd love to see that range fleshed out a little bit. The rocker's also going to work with the digital zoom as well though. So if you're in regular 4K modes, you're going to be able to crop in a decent amount using that digital rocker without sacrificing resolution because of course of the 7K sensor. All of the buttons are laid out sensibly for video work with dedicated labels for their default functions, but they're also assignable. There are 14 assignable buttons in total, which is impressive. And on top of that, Canon lets you put pretty much any function in the camera on these as well. So you can really make this camera behave the way that you want it to, just like on their higher end Cinema EOS cameras. Okay, let's do some comparing this to other cameras. We're going to go over this all in much more detail, of course, once we have a final production unit of the C50. That way it's fair. But for now, let's just see how they hold up on paper. The obvious comparison from Sony's lineup is the FX3, a fantastic camera, but it's nearly 5 years old now. In fact, it's just been replaced by this model, which is the FX3A. But it's the exact same camera, just with a better LCD panel on the back. So really it's the same thing, but that is a move that strongly hints that Sony aren't about to replace it anytime soon. Presumably because it still sells very well indeed. The two cameras are pretty similar sizes with a similar design. The C50 is that little bit deeper because of the larger active fan cooling space. The FX3 has a stabilized IBIS sensor, while the C50 doesn't. It also has a higher second base ISO, so potentially it will have better high ISO performance. In pretty much all other aspects though, the more modern C50 completely outperforms it. It's 7K rather than 4K, or over in stills it's 32 megapixels rather than 12. They can both do 4K 120 with the whole sensor, but the C50 can also do 7K 60p and oversampled 4K up to 60p as well. The C50 has RAW and H.265 at all frame rates, which the FX3 doesn't have. The C50 has open gate, while no Sony camera outside of the Venice has that at all yet. It has much more assistance tools like false color and waveforms, much more control over the HDMI output and what it shows. The FX3 has no dedicated timecode inputs, plus the C50 has a few extra tricks up its sleeve, which I haven't even managed to mention yet in this video, like Frame.io support, a virtual production plugin for Unreal Engine, and Cook's Eye support for PL lenses with Canon's PL adapter. All of this stuff that the FX3 doesn't have. The FX3 is a fantastic camera, which many of you are going to be very familiar with at this point. But there is no doubt that the C50 is a far more feature-rich and powerful camera. And surprisingly, it actually costs less at launch than the FX3's current price online, which is very impressive. Within Canon's lineup, this sits between the R5C and the C80. Compared to the R5C, the C50 has a full-size HDMI port, very important, the XLR top handle, open gate modes, better autofocus, and better heat management, while the R5C has a higher resolution with 8K up to 60p and has this EVF, of course, so is a much more stills-focused hybrid design rather than video-focused hybrid design. The C80 though is a very interesting comparison. It has a few obvious advantages over the C50. Built-in ND, of course, that's probably the biggest one. Then there's 12G SDI, a bigger BPA-style battery for much longer run times, the same sensor as the C400, so it'll match there, more buttons on it, mini XLRs built into the camera itself, so you don't need to use the top handle all the time. But it doesn't have CF Express card slots, so its RAW recording is more limited than the C50's. It can't do 6K 60p, for example, and it can't do RAW in ST or HQ modes, and it doesn't have open gate mode. Interestingly, Canon have announced alongside this camera that they're adding OpenGate to the higher end C400 over a firmware update, which is fantastic news, incredibly welcome. But there's nothing on the C80. Not yet, anyway. Fingers crossed. So, that is the new Canon C50, their smallest cinema camera yet, which has come with some real surprises. There's a huge market for small compact cameras like this, and Sony have proved that well and truly with the FX3. And 5 years later, there are still very few options on the market. Now though, with the C50, Canon could well be the best option out there. Their lineup is getting stronger and stronger. This is far more powerful than the FX3, far more practical for uncontrolled environments than the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K, and far better for dedicated video work than any of the mirrorless cameras like the Lumix S1 Mark II, Nikon Z8, or similar hybrid options. Canon really seem to have hit the ball out of the park with this one. But what do you think? Let us know in the comment section, and pre-orders for the C50 are open now over at Pro AV. We're planning a lot more videos on the C50, so make sure you subscribe for those. And if you want to see anything in particular, let us know in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.